next, I'd like to have Her Excellency Ms. Lana Nusseibeh, President of UN Women Executive Board, chime in a little bit. You know, the UN Women Executive Board is responsible for providing policy guidance and governing the operational activities of UN Women and ensuring that this entity is responsive to the needs and priorities of recipient countries. So my question to you, as President of the 41-country Executive Board of UN Women, how do you see your role in shaping the working methods and strategy of the board to reflect basically the changing world of work for its members and for the future of UN Women itself?
Thank you very much for having me here today, and I'd like to take this moment to also salute Fumzile for the work she has done for UN Women, the key agency that is mandated to take the gender equality goals global. For the UAE, this is a very personal journey because for us, gender empowerment and gender equality is a fundamental principle as both a foreign policy priority, a domestic priority, and as you've heard today, because the economic numbers make sense. I think that's why that role is reflected in taking on this role as President of the Executive Board, where I facilitate the dialogue amongst member states, not only the 41 member states, but the regions that they represent, in terms of supporting, enforcing, and facilitating the essential work that UN Women does, both here in headquarters, but also around the world. And I think that is key. We've heard a number of data points today. We've heard that it would take over 100 years at our current rate to close the gender empowerment gap in the workforce. In the UAE, the same data from the World Economic Forum shows that we are #1 in the region in terms of the highest gender empowerment, literacy, and participation of women in the workforce. So I fully endorse Ambassador Patriotti's point that there are lessons from the north and there are lessons from the south. Today is not simply a celebration. I think we heard that very clearly from Anne Hathaway, the new Goodwill Ambassador. Today is a call to step up for action, not just women, it's also the men. And I think looking across the room, seeing how many men are here today, it's clear the echo chamber has expanded. We are now all talking to each other as an integrated society because we each represent 50% of our population. And we know economically that we could add $12 trillion to our economy by 2025 if we simply closed the gap at the workforce in terms of gender. So the numbers show that to be true. What do we do for the Executive Board? I'm going to hold up a chart that I have just seen for the first time this morning and that I think is worth looking at. This shows, this tiny little circle here is the funding that UN Women gets for this really important mandate. All these other circles represent all the other agencies. Now, all of them do critical work. Right in the center is DPKO, the Department of Peacekeeping Operations. Let me tell you something that, again, is supported by the data. When women are not at the peace table negotiating the peace agreement is likely to fail within 5 years. When women are at the table negotiating the peace, that number goes up to a likelihood of lasting 15 years or more by 35%. Given the global crises, given the global protracted crises we are facing today, upwards of 65 million people displaced, in our region alone, more than 50% under the age of 25, and the youth challenges along with the gender challenges that pose, because we know that in times of conflict, the most vulnerable, the most affected are women and children. We can't simply sit here and pay lip service to these global goals and to global goal number 5 for gender empowerment. We have to support the mandate. We have to support the agency and the people who have been tasked to do this. In my role as President of the Executive Board, we're not only going to be sitting and facilitating this dialogue in New York, but with the executive presidents of other boards, we will be making field visits to Nepal and hopefully to India to see operations on the ground, and specifically UN Women operations on the ground, and to understand how we impact from New York globally. How do we project outwards? I think what we heard here today is that over 100 years is simply too long. It doesn't make economic sense, and it doesn't make sense for our holistic view of the world, for the peace and security we are trying to achieve in a really, really difficult time. So we support the new Secretary General's agenda. He is firmly committed to this principle, both in his cabinet. But as we've all said, the UN has to look like the world we wish it to be, not the world that it is with all its imperfections. So he's committed to changing that 22% senior management figure that are only women. He is committed to changing that within the next 5 years of his mandate. And we support him and we salute him as the United Arab Emirates because it's the smart thing to do and it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Very nice. You know, I'd just like to follow up with you. As president of the executive board, you are the second woman to actually hold this position and the first representative from the Gulf Cooperation Council. Can you tell us a little bit about your past experiences and what has influenced your leadership on the board?
Thank you. Well, I think my past experience is very much a reflection of the country I come from, my country, the United Arab Emirates. And I think growing up in that environment has enabled me to take on this role and to feel supported by both the men and the women in my life. And that starts at a leadership level from the top. So it starts both with the founder of our country, His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, and the First Lady of our country, Her Highness Sheikh Fatima bint Mubarak, and their national strategy for empowering women in the country. When the UAE was formed in 1971, there were only 40 university graduates in the country. Today, over 70% of our university graduates are women, STEM graduates, so science and technology, education, math. Our women are in the judiciary, the police, the military, and of course a third of our cabinet. In fact, our Prime Minister just announced that within the next 5 years, he wants to see 50% of his cabinet ministers as women. So I'm very much a product of my country, and I'm very much a product also of my home, where my father took a very active, supportive role in helping me achieve my goals, whether it was at the age of 8 when I told him I wanted to try out for the boys' football team and he mustn't stop me because there simply wasn't a girls' football team at my school. And going on into my career, I think, as Anne mentioned, the support of the father figure in the home is incredibly important, and I pay tribute every day to mine, who continues to support me in my career. I think also in terms of being from a region, the Gulf Cooperation Council are really trying to set a new benchmark from a South-South cooperation model, from a development model for how we can do this and provide humbly our experience to the world about why this model works for us, why it has empowered us, why it has created a stable, secure, and prosperous society. So the global pay debate we've just been listening to, thankfully in my country, doesn't exist because we've enshrined equal pay for work in our law. There's a very simple way of doing this. You legislate it and you make it your law. We've enshrined women's representation on boards in our law. We have a gender balance council dedicated to achieving this, and Famzila has been a frequent visitor to our country, and she's seen the implementation of these policies on the ground. So I very much salute my country, my background, and the support I have had from both leadership but also from the grassroots in our country, where we are told that there simply is no difference between what men and women can do. Paid maternity leave is 3 months in our country, and we continue still today to have the debate, is it enough, what should we be doing next? When I had my son, I was allowed to take advantage of a 2-hour daily breastfeeding law. I was allowed to go home and feed my son any 2 hours of the day I wanted, fully supported. I worked at the minister's office at the time, fully supported by him, to take that time to also continue, after paid maternity leave, to continue to give my son the nourishment and the love and the affection and the care that he needed. And so I salute what Anne said about the role of parenting and about the role of recognizing what men have to do in that setup, that it's a combined effort. It takes a community, a village, a country to raise a child, and we should all be raising the men and women who will make us proud in that endeavor.
Thank you. Well, we salute you for all of the work you've done. And next